What's going on? This is Zach Adelstein with DFS Army, and today we're going to be going over the Week 7 main slate on Draftkings. Really like this slate. This is probably the best weekend of college football we've had so far, and it's really going to be some fun games. An interesting slate they put together here with a group of five matchup that I think could actually win some GPPs here, and mostly really good games that we're going to use pieces of and half pieces of for everything. Where we've had some trash we haven't really used the past couple weeks. With that, let's just jump right in. So the first matchup here we're going to look at is Auburn and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is favored by 14 and a half here with a total of 54 and a half. An interesting game. Auburn hasn't had the best defense this year. Not interested in the quarterbacks, but going over to the running backs. Zach Evans and Judkins are priced basically the same here. Evans $100 more, but I like both of them here. I think there's scenarios where you can play both of them in GPP lineups if you have 150 lineups. If you're gonna MME, last week they both had 11 carries. Judkins got in the end zone twice. He get a reception. Has a really nice floor. I think he's a top play if you're gonna play him in cash. I think he's the guy to go. I think it's hard to go to these guys with them eating into each other so much in cash. But Evans had a really nice day. Had 80 yards, had a reception as well, a touchdown. They both had really nice days, and this is both it's a good defense to attack. So both GPP plays for me and Zach Evans, especially with I think more ownership going to Judkins here. Jatavius Mingo last week kind of looked like he did last year. Had a huge week, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, just went off. Really did what he did last year. Had more points in that one game than I believe. Basically about equal to the rest of the season combined. There's always a ceiling there. I'm not going to chase that though. It's just not what this team has been doing this year, but it is there. It is a possibility. Malik Heath is still the most consistent guy here. Didn't do as much last week with Mingo going off, but I do think he's a GPP play if you want to go there. He's a little expensive for me. I'm not looking anywhere on Auburn. Just not. They're not doing it this year. They're not really getting much, and there's enough else even down there at 5K range that I'd much rather go to than Ashford. Going over to a game that's really interesting. This Kansas OU game. OU is favored. It's gone between 7 and 9 all week. Totals around 64 and a half, 65. Some really interesting places to go here. An interesting game all around. Dylan Gabriel might be back here. No real clue. How it went last week. He was on the field warming up in pads and then came out in shorts. So it's going to be hard to know what he's going to do before the game. He has some upside, but I don't necessarily want to go there at 9K anyways. And there's just other places I like better. I actually think if Gabriel goes, it's a little bit better for Kansas just because I think they put up a little, I think it could be a grinded game if he go. If he does go, I think they could put up some points and really have to force Kansas to go. I really like Jason Bean here as a GPP play. He really looked efficient last week coming in. He doesn't have the same mobility and the same skill set that Jalen Daniels has. But, we saw last week he put up, in 2.5 quarters, put up 28 DraftKings points. This is an OU defense I want to attack. And until they prove otherwise, I'm going to keep going there, even with a backup quarterback, especially if I think he's going to get low ownership here. So this is someone I kind of want to look to. Devin Neal is another guy that kind of interested in. Didn't do much last week, but this run defense for Oklahoma again has not been able to do too much this year. Don't want a ton of him. Don't love the price too much, and there's other places I want to go. But that is somewhere I would consider going. I don't love either of these receiving cores. They just spread it out way too much. If you wanted Mims, but he's always way too expensive this year. I have no idea why. Farouk was given some end rounds last week. They really want to try to get him involved. But, if Gabriel comes back, I don't know if he's going to be getting those, and this price is just not worth it. Main plays for me would be Bean, maybe some Neal, and then if Gabriel comes back, if you want to go there, you can. Moving on to Iowa State at Texas. Texas is favored by 16.5 here with a total of 46.5. It's an interesting spread with such a low total. Also an interesting game. I think Quinn Ewers is nice GPP play. 5,700 had a really nice game last week. We kind of saw the talent. This is a really good defense. They don't give up a ton of points. They've only given up more than 14, I believe, once this year. To Baylor, gave up 31. So, it is a good defense he's going up against here. But at 5,700, he is a piece I want in GPPs with what we saw this upside. And this is going to be a high-powered offense. He can dump it down to Bijan, who can go for 80 any play. He's got Xavier Worthy. Davian Sanders has a really nice connection with him. Moving on, speaking of Bijan is the most expensive non-quarterback on the slate, 9,200. Just kind of a tough spot for him, but I mean, you come over here and you look at what he has done, and he is there in this price. Got a nice ceiling, got a pretty nice floor, regardless of who he's playing. Even when he can't get it going, running the ball, at 57 yards, they're going to get him the ball passing. He's going to get touchdowns. Has at least one every game, and he's up to 10 on the year, rushing and 1 receiving. So yeah, I mean he's always in play. Brock's an interesting play. Texas does have a really good run defense this year, and he's not getting a ton of volume, which I don't like. But he's a contrarian GPP play if you want to go there. Going to wide receiver, Xavier Hutchinson is always a top play. He is getting a ton of volume. I think he's number 1 in the country, averaging 15 targets a week. They're going to have to air it out here to stay in the game, so he's going to get peppered here. Could get 20 targets. Who knows? So, I mean, yeah, at 8,300 is still too cheap for him probably. So he is in play if you can get to him. Xavier Worthy's too cheap here for me. Hasn't done a ton with yours. Had a little bit, had, a nice catch in that Bama game with him. Had that big game. But we know this guy's upside. We know what he can do. He now has 4 touchdowns over the last 3 games. And eventually they're going to get it going and get this downfield passing going. They didn't have to last week, so I don't think, they really worried about it too much. But at 5,700, for his skill set, I do think he's a GPP play. The other place way too cheap for me is Tavian Sanders. Throw out the weeks in between. Just look at the 2 weeks with Ewers. That week 1, he had 6 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Last week, 5 for 71 and 2 touchdowns. These are 2 guys that were close to each other in high school. They threw together in high school. They graduated at the same time, came out the same year. Now they're back together at Texas, and they just seem to have a real chemistry together. At 3,700, he is a great cheap play for me. I think his part in this offense is just going to go. I think he was the number 1 athlete coming out of high school. They called him that just because he was playing both defensive and tight end, and could have gone either way. But yeah, I mean, 3,700, he is way too cheap here. Moving right along, Minnesota at Illinois. These Big Ten low total games. Total here is 39. Minnesota is favored by 6.5 at Illinois. Opened up at 3, moved to 6.5. So I do think the bookmakers thought this would be a little bit tighter. Tommy DeVito has not been ruled out yet. I read as of last today, but Williams is probably going to go. But Tommy DeVito has not been ruled out, but not ruled in either. If he doesn't go, Sikowski's just awful. I don't love this Illinois team here, anyways, outside of the running back. But I definitely wouldn't touch him if Sikowski goes. Same thing. I think here this is going to be a battle of 2 running backs. Mo Ibrahim is amazing. He's going down in price a little bit. Illinois is the number 1 rush defense in the country. That is, makes Mo Ibrahim a GPP only play for me, just because what you're paying for him. If he gets 20 carries for 97 yards and a touchdown, it's not good enough. So you got to be wary there. Chase Brown here though is a decent price. Minnesota's a good run defense in their own right, but he's going to get a ton of volume. Look what he did last week. He didn't do a ton with it, but has at least 100 yards every game this year. Not totally doing the most with the touchdowns. Has 4 on the year now, but with that yardage and that volume, just at 7,200, he's a great play here. Not much else to say about it. But yeah, that's kind of where I am here. I don't hate Isaiah Williams if he is back for sure here, just with the volume he gets with DeVito. But if DeVito's out, I'm not going to touch that. Going over to Penn State at Michigan. This is one of the good games on this slate. Not necessarily the best for DFS, but I do think there's some spots to hit here. Michigan's favored by 7 here with a 52-point total. It's amazing. This total is 13 points higher than that Minnesota-Illinois game we just talked about. Starting at QB, Sean Clifford's too expensive here for me. Although Michigan has given up some soft coverage yardage to opposing quarterbacks. But Clifford just, he's not consistent enough. There's other places I'd rather go here. Didn't have to do much and didn't do much last week against Northwestern. And just in, most of his games has not put up what we need to win GPPs and get where we need to be. JJ McCarthy's a guy that, I think eventually is going to be a really good quarterback if they develop him the right way. Threw it 38 times last week. This was tied 10-10, later in the game. So they had to really get the pass going, and they did. JJ McCarthy looked decent. I think this could be another place that they have to do that because Penn State has a really good run defense, one of the top in the country. I believe top 5. That leads us to running back and Blake Corum. At this price, he's GPP for me just because of Penn State's, how good they are against the run. He's going to get volume. I don't think they care who they're playing. He's going to get volume. I mean, he went off against Iowa, who is another good run defense. So this is a place that, he could go, and I will have some shares of him in GPPs. But at this price, I can't get there in cash. I just don't trust it enough. As far as Singleton and even Allen go, I think they're decent GPP plays. Katron Allen got a ton of carries last week against Northwestern. And even, against Central Michigan, he's, a freshman. They want to get him going, and he's really cheap. Singleton, had a ton of carries last week too. They really just want to get this run game going, it seems. Each one of them had more runs than Clifford did passes last week. This could be a little bit tougher this week against a Michigan team that is decent against the run. They're not bad at all. But I do think both of them are GPP plays for sure. Donovan Edwards, last week had a few more carries, didn't have as many targets. They didn't, use him as much. Kind of going to fade him until they really start getting him involved here. And going over to wide receiver, with that lower pass volume, I really do want to kind of fade this wide receivers on both teams until I kind of see what really happens, except with the tight end for Michigan. So Luke Schoonmaker, I believe that's how you say his name, over the last 3 weeks has 24 targets. He has caught 20 of those, has touchdown 2 of those weeks. Really nice GPP play, has over 20 DraftKings points 2 of those weeks. I think they're going to continue to go that way. It seems like a safety valve for JJ McCarthy and someone that he really likes to hit. If he's going to go there, this is a nice cheap play, another cheap play that is going to really open up some of those higher end plays for you on this slate. All right, moving over to Miami at Virginia Tech. Miami's favored here by 7.5. The total is 47 here. Some really cheap plays on this game that I want to look over. Tyler Van Dyke just went off for almost 500 yards, 3 touchdowns, and is at 5K. Virginia Tech is a little bit better defense than UNC, but not that much better. Van Dyke has been boom or bust very much so this year. I mean, you can see even with that 500-yard game, his fantasy points per game this year is still at 15, so it's not like he is the next great coming by any means. Before that, all of these sub-15 fantasy point games. But he is an option here. He is a GPP play. Going over to running back, Malachi Thomas came back last week and ran 15 times, I believe. He is the lead back here. He was the lead dog here every year, the workhorse. I think they, get him more involved this week, could get up to 20 touches. Miami does have a really good run defense, though. One thing that really confuses me is why you have Knighton priced up more than Parrish here. Knighton is the running back who he started the year hurt, has not done a ton, whereas you have Parrish who is the clear, RB1, even when they're not running it a ton. And this is a decent matchup for him. Virginia Tech is decent, but they're not that great, and Parrish could easily get 15, 18 points here, sub 5K. Parrish is a nice GPP, and I think I'd play him in cash as well, at that price to get some value out of him. Going over to wide receiver, Caleb Smith is somebody I really want to look at 5K. He has 30 targets over the last 3 weeks. I believe mixed in there is a 10-target game and a 14-target game. He has, that's Keyshawn Smith. Caleb Smith, down here at 4K. Um, he's done pretty well with them. Had a dud kind of in the middle there. Didn't do a ton, but I mean, 18, 26 points. You give me a nice upside at 4K. It's another one of those lower price value guys that's getting a ton of volume, and that's what I really like to target for my value. I don't like as much of the boom bust guys. Any game someone can bust. One catch for 80 yards and a touchdown. It happens regularly with some 4K guy. But if you give me a 4K guy that's getting 30 targets in 10 games, averaging 10 targets a game over the last 3 games, I will take that in a heartbeat. All right, moving over, probably the game of the day, one of the games of the year so far. Alabama at Tennessee. Alabama is favored by 7, and the total is 65.5 here. Interesting game. Lots of news we need to watch. Bryce Young, he's bounced back and forth between questionable and doubtful. The latest news here, the latest news bit is from last week. He warmed up last week, didn't even attempt to pass. Obviously wasn't going to go. You'll know it a little bit before the game. I want to watch the news really heavily before this game and see if I can find anything. This is the second half, second wave of kickoffs on this slate. He's the most expensive quarterback on the slate. And if you don't have him in your lineup to start, you're obviously not going to be able to get to him. But if he goes, I think this is a fantastic spot for him. Tennessee just has a really soft pass defense. They have all year, and this is a place I would love to target. And if you, like I said, if you don't have Bryce Young, you can't pivot to him. So you could get him here at a 3-4% ownership if we don't know. And I think it's going to be like last week. We're not going to know until he walks onto the field what's going to happen. That's what all these coaches have been doing. That's what OU did last week. That's what Alabama did last week. But it could come to bite you. You're going to have to be ready to really put in the work. 30 minutes, to change your lineups around 30 minutes before kickoff of that game, if that is something that is going to happen, and he gets pulled. So yeah, he is something that I'm really going to watch. Hendon Hooker, it's interesting. Alabama has had a pretty good pass defense and run defense this year. Very good on defense, but they haven't played a quarterback like Hendon Hooker yet. It's kind of like an immovable object meets an unstoppable force. I do think Hooker has upside here. I do think his ownership's a little bit higher than I want it to be when it all comes down to it, just because of the nature of this game and how much the media is on it and how much attention is around it. But I do think he could have a nice game here. So it's something I really want to watch, kind of try to see what the ownership is going to be like there. And over to running back, I think Gibbs is a nice play either way. He's more of a GPP play for me if Young is in. If not, I think he's going to get 22, 25 carries here. Tennessee's had a decent run defense, but they haven't had to see the run a whole ton because they have been, put up nice points. And the other team has had to as well. So that is something I really want to watch. I don't want to touch the Tennessee running backs here. I don't really like playing running backs against Alabama. They have too good of a defense there. And going over to wide receiver, there are lots of places I want to look at Tennessee here. I personally have kind of made it a rule I'm not playing Alabama running wide receivers until someone kind of breaks out or they figure out how they want to go. Obviously, I'm definitely not playing them if Bryce Young isn't going. And even when he goes, there's just no one that seems to want the ball. So they just kind of air it out here and there. And Jahmyr Gibbs ends up being the guy that gets the most targets in some games. At Tennessee, though, that's where I really want to look. Cedric Tillman, I want to see if he's good to go. He had surgery a few weeks ago with the thought of him coming back here. It's a surgery that a lot of guys have. For this, it's the bungee rope surgery, I believe it's called, and it's in the ankle. They just go and work on the tendons in there, and I kind of want to see if he's good to go. If he is not good to go, I think Jalen Hyatt's a decent play anyways. If he's not good to go, Jalen Hyatt is one of the top plays on the slate for me. They're going to air it out a ton. They're going to have to, I think, and he is a guy that can really go off. That also helps Brew McCoy a ton here. Either way, I think Brew McCoy is going to be involved in this offense now that we see what he can do. But I really like him with Tillman out. That being said, if Tillman comes in, he becomes a decent play, but we don't know what he can do. That also, I think, takes ownership off of Hyatt and McCoy. I think they become really good, especially McCoy becomes a really good GPP play. He didn't do a ton before Tillman was out, so all the volume was going to Hyatt and Tillman, and now they see what he can do. I think that will funnel a lot of ownership away from him, and I really really like that that option in GPPs if they go back to him and look to him, as Alabama will have to put a lot of attention on Hyatt and Tillman. Moving over to Arkansas at BYU. Arkansas is going to altitude, and they are favored here by 1.5 with a total of 63. This game jumped 3 points. BYU was originally favored here, and then it looked like Jefferson was coming back and then verified. So that game has switched over to Arkansas being a favorite. Going over to quarterback, Jaren Hall looks hurt to me lately. I don't know what's up with him, but at 8,100, he just hasn't been himself lately. Even in that Utah State game, kind of around halftime, it looked like he got hurt. He gets him to like one pass downfield after halftime. Everything else was just way underneath and behind the line of scrimmage. And then only 17 passes against Notre Dame in a close game. Just isn't like him. I don't think he's fully healthy. KJ Jefferson's way too cheap here. I don't know what they did, but that Bama game, I kind of throw that out. It's Alabama. Outside of that Alabama, look at what KJ Jefferson has done. 32, 23, 34, 33. He puts up huge points. BYU is no great defense this year, and he's 6,400. He's another top play on this slate for me. There's no other way to say it. He gets it done with his legs, gets it done with his arms. Rushing TD upside. He's going to throw it. You never know which receiver really to stack with him. So you just play him naked up there by himself, and he is a great play. Going over running back. I am not – Chris Brooks is interesting to me. If they are going to give him volume, I really like him, but they don't give him volume. Arkansas has been a little soft on defense for sure at times. But like I said, if they're not going to give him volume, you can't really do much there. Raheem Sanders, another player that is way too cheap. He's going to get volume regardless. Got 22 carries against Alabama with KJ in, same thing down here. Got 20 last week without Jefferson in. They were able to stack the box a little bit more against him, which definitely served against him. But still got 4 receptions, got those dump downs. He's going to get involved a ton here. BYU does not have, again, the best defense, and he is someone that I really want to target. I think he's great in all formats. Going over to the wide receivers, Arkansas, Hazelwood's been decent at times, hasn't been great. No one's really stepped up there. BYU's wide receiver room has been a mess with injuries and who's doing what and who's out this week. One consistency there has been Cody Epps. Every week he has put up a decent score. He's getting in the end zone regularly. 5 touchdowns in the last 4 games. They're using him all over the field. It doesn't matter who's on the field. So he's a guy. He's another value player that I am going to have in my player pool this week. But outside of that, I'm probably not going to have much BYU here. Moving over to another game that I think is a top game on this slate is Oklahoma State at TCU. Both of these teams are interesting. Oklahoma State seems to have struggled lately on defense, but their offense is putting up enough points to get it done. And then obviously TCU has looked really good. They kind of came out flat last week at times against Kansas. First half, their offense couldn't get going, and in the second half, the defense couldn't stop. The backup quarterback couldn't stop being for Kansas. But they got it done, and this is a nice game here. This game's at TCU, who is favored by 3.5 to 4 points, depending where you look, and total is sitting at 68.5. Max Duggan and Spencer Sanders are both great. Really good plays here. Duggan. I kind of want to see Oklahoma State last week really struggled against Bear Morton, who came in for Texas Tech, freshman quarterback who is kind of the future there. And, but there was no tape on him, so it'll be interesting. Here they get Spencer Sanders, who has been really good this year. Here they get Max Duggan, who has been really good this year. But I think this game is going to go back and forth, and TCU is going to have to air it out, which they have the last 2 weeks. When they're throwing it, 30-something times a game, and they're letting Duggan run it, 6, 7, 8, 9 times a game, and they're giving him opportunities around the end zone, which is really important, which they hadn't done before. I think he's got great upside. Obviously, the last 2 weeks he's put up 90 combined fantasy points. Spencer Sanders is probably the top quarterback for me on this slate. Just with what he's done, he's put up a ton of points. He's got a great floor this year. TCU has struggled against the pass a lot of the year. They've kind of been but don't break in the sense that their offense is good enough to make up for their defense. But I do think that TCU is going to put up points, so Oklahoma State is going to have to put up points as well, and this is how they do it. You saw last week that game that was kind of back and forth. Sanders aired it out 45 times. He is going to throw it a ton when he needs to. Now, when he doesn't put it up a ton. But this is a game he's going to need to put it up a ton, and he's going to air it out a ton. He is not getting a ton of touchdown volume, especially lately, which is not helping. If he got an extra if he went for 2 touchdowns and 3 touchdowns in each one of these games, this would go from 57 points, 58 points the last 2 games to 70 points over the last 2 games and look a lot better. But yeah, I mean, he's just, I think he's a guy that can put up 303 touchdowns easily. He just hasn't really done it yet this year, and I still think he's got a great floor even without that. Moving over to running back, Dominic Richardson has been getting volume when needed, but even with that, he's not doing a ton with it. He's sitting at 4.1 yards per carry, not too great. Has decent touchdowns, no multiple touchdowns yet this year. He's getting involved in the passing game, which I do like. Just have a huge ceiling yet this year. And at his price, I kind of want that before I go that high when we have Kendra Miller sitting here, who has had, better, probably average overall, better ceiling games, several better ceiling games, has big playability, has, at least 1 touchdown in every game this year, is getting used, a little bit less in the passing game, but still plenty. And, this is a team, both teams are supposed to put up a ton of points, but give me the guy that is running, at 6.9 yards a clip and has big play upside, even if he has a little bit less volume at a $800 discount. Going over wide receiver, kind of got to keep an eye for Oklahoma State. They kind of have a lot of things in play this week. If Braden Johnson's back, I wish they kept him down sub 5K where he was. This is that Z receiver that they love to target so much. Probably going to fade him at this price just because there's so many guys that they're trying to get involved in mouths to feed. Sticking up top here real quick, let's go over Quentin Johnson. For last week, he had 21 targets on the year. And then last week, I guess he figured out that we're in the middle of a football season, and he had 17 targets for 206 yards and a touchdown. Just went off. And that's what they should be doing every week with Quentin Johnson. He is, one of the best wide receivers in the country. He should be a first-round draft pick. And I have no idea what they've been doing with him and why he has not been involved. But if they're going to use him like that, play him. He's GPP for me. It's a great price for him if he's going to get, even 10 to 12 targets here. But mini game, before that, the previous 4 games, he was averaging just over 5 targets a game. So you got to kind of figure out what they want to do with him here to do that. But at 6,700, I would love to have a decent chunk of him and take that risk. Don't really love any of the other wide receivers for TCU just because they kind of spread it around a decent bit. But then, come down here to Oklahoma State. Last week with Johnson out, Presley had a decent game. I think he led with 9 targets last week. Come down here. Jaden Bray came back last week. Didn't do a lot, but he was supposed to be the guy going into the season who they really wanted to get involved. And then you come down here to Bryson Green, who last week had 9 targets with Johnson out. Caught 5 of those for under 15 yards and a touchdown. Has a touchdown in all but 1 game this year. Every FBS game they have played this year has a touchdown in. Another mid-price guy that I really like here in a game that should put up a ton of points. So he's a guy that I'm kind of keying in on more than others just because of the value and the unknowns of what's going on in this game, on that passing game. Moving on over to North Carolina State at Syracuse. Right now, it is Syracuse -3 with a total of 44.5. Well, it has to do with what happened with Devin Leary, and if he's good to go, it looks like he is not. But just something to keep an eye on. Garrett Trader is sitting at 6K. He did not have the best game last week or the last couple weeks for him, but at 6K, these are all great performances. You've seen his upside, UConn, 32, 38. North Carolina State is a decent defense, but if he gets me 25, even if he gets me, if he gets me 20 fantasy points and I can pay up elsewhere, I love this. He's going to run. He obviously didn't last week. They were playing Wagner, but he's going to run. He's going to air it out a decent amount. and he's going to have the opportunity. They don't push down the field a ton, doesn't always get a ton of touchdowns. That Virginia game, they struggled. But before that start of the season, was doing really well. Moving over to running back, Sean Tucker is coming down in price. I think my feeling on it is they wanted to get him going. They knew he'd struggled the last couple games. They gave him 23 carries against Wagner. You don't do that unless you really want to get someone going. So, had 232 yards, 3 touchdowns, got involved in the passing game as well. I think they lean on him here. I think he's going to get his 20 carries, and he's a decent play here. North Carolina State hasn't been they have been a very good run defense, but I don't think he will carry a ton of ownership, and he has that 30-point upside. The only player I really want at wide receiver on either of these teams right now, without knowing who's starting quarterback for NC State, is Gadsden. Gadsden has 17 targets over the last 2 weeks, only caught 11 of them, has not gotten into the end zone, but he's a decent stack with Schrader. If you want to stack Schrader, you certainly don't need to, but I like that target share. He's a little bit more expensive than I love, but for GPPs, I think he's a guy that will get overlooked and have a low ownership. Moving over to another interesting game here, Maryland at Illinois. At Indiana, I'm sorry. Maryland at Indiana. Maryland is favored by 10.5 with a 61.5 point total. Looking at Maryland here, baby Tua, Talia Tagovailoa, had, a decent game for him last week, and kind of another, kind of more like what we saw last year of him against the defenses that weren't very good. And then you have an Indiana team just gave up 300 yards passing to Michigan, who doesn't do that too much. They don't have a great passing defense, and I think this is a decent spot for him at a decent price. He has not been as consistent this year for fantasy purposes, but I do like this spot. Going over to running back, we went with Littleton last week. He did not do much, didn't get in the end zone for the first time this year. I don't really want to chase it. His price came back up, so it's kind of one of those places where I'm kind of going to avoid most of the running game here. I don't feel like you really need to. There's other places I'd rather go. Hemby's not getting the volume. He's getting it used in the passing game, which is interesting to watch. But at this point, he's just, this is just a running game I don't want to mess with. A few places I want to look in the passing game. Jared still leads this team with in targets, but if you come down, Corey Dykes is second on the team in targets. Another cheap guy, had a big game last week. He used a little bit around the end zone, but he has big play upside. Each of the last 3 games has at least a 44-yard catch. So he is another cheap punt play you can use. Then Cam Camper was sick a couple weeks ago. Last week didn't have a big game, but was a much tougher defense. I think they pepper him again here. I think last week he still had 8 to 9 targets. Coming off that sickness probably didn't help, I would assume. So, yeah, he's another guy I'll go back to the well with here. In a game that should put up some points too, and semi shootout with a decent total. All right, moving over to the to the Group of 5 game on the slate. There are lots of places to target in this game. It's weird that they put it on this slate, but I like it. Let's just start at the top here at quarterback. You got Jack Salopic, I'm going to say. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Has not put up the best stats this year. I think you throw out Michigan State's hard there. Pitt as well. Didn't do too much there. Ball State was decent. So the reason I really like him here is because the Ohio defense is absolutely dreadful. They've given up at least 300 passing yards to every FBS team they have played this year. 4 games over 300 passing yards. It's just what they do. Western Michigan airs it out 30, 35 times a game anyways. On average, obviously, there's more or less depending on where you look, but on average, it's 33, I believe. This is a game that has a 1-point spread. Western Michigan is favored by 1 point with a total of 60. Expected to shoot out that 60-point total that we look for. And I just, this is, look at that. I mean, in 6 games, they're giving up 386 passing yards a game. They're just bad against the pass. Then you get Curtis Rourke. Come down here. He's going to air it out a ton at times. Didn't need to against Akron. They were blowing them out, but still put up 35 DraftKings points. Has over, over 100 DraftKings points, about 110 in the last 3 games alone. Obviously, that's against Fordham, but Akron and Kent State are in their division. You can't fault them for that. This is just a good spot for him. He's going to put up big points. His bad games down here are against Penn State. Florida Atlantic had a great game. Against teams that are at his level, he puts up huge scores. At 6,200, he is a great play. Moving over to running back. Sean Tyler seems to have taken the lead at this spot over Jefferson. Obviously we'll get more of these in Max in a few weeks from now. But guy I really want to look here as Bangera. Dude, past 2 weeks has put up, almost 60 DraftKings points, getting a ton of touchdowns. This game is supposed to put up a decent amount of points, getting used in the passing game every week. It's 5,500. And there's not a ton of value at running back here. So he is that mid-price guy that I really like to hit here. I think he's viable in all formats. And then going over to wide receiver, starting at the top, Corey Crooms hasn't had a huge game this year. But again, Ohio defense is very bad. This is a great spot for him. He's a little expensive, but for GPPs, he is a great play. And then a great mid-price guy is Wiggles. Over the last 3 games, he's averaging over 26 DraftKings points a week. He has 25 targets over that time. He's caught 23 of them, 3 touchdowns, over 300 yards receiving. He's just, he's doing great. And again, that's against those teams that are more on his level. Come down here against Florida Atlantic, and again, 22 DraftKings points. He should put up 20 plus points here at 5K. He is, for me, one of the top wide receivers on this slate in this weird game. So now we move over from that, which should put up a ton of points, to Wisconsin and Michigan State. I do want to say last week, Graham Mertz went absolutely bananas with 30 DraftKings points, and that's only because he threw for 5 touchdowns. That to me is insane, that you can throw for 5 touchdowns and still only put up 32 DraftKings points. But that is what Graham Mertz did last week against Northwestern. Didn't get to 300 yards, so didn't get the bonus. I'm not going to chase this. To me, that is, he's not going to do that every week, especially not with Braylon Allen on the team. So he's a guy I will definitely be fading here. Let other people chase that. Speaking of Braylon Allen, he is at 8,200 here, and I think this is a great play. I think they are going to continue to lean on him constantly with this new coaching staff. That is what this team is. They are a run-first team. And, they got away from that against Illinois, and they came right back and gave them 23 carries. This Michigan State team is not a great run defense at all, and I think they're going to continue to lean on Allen here. Dyke is the one wide receiver for Wisconsin. I might have a piece of it, 5,600. Decent games back-to-back weeks. Had 3 touchdowns last week. I will say this Michigan State, pass defense is not great. Honestly, if Graham Mertz hadn't had that game last week, I might target him a little bit here. But because he did, I think his ownership will be way too high for the upside, and it's just not worth it. But I might pivot off of that by going over and getting some pieces of Dyke. And then the other piece I kind of like here is Jalen Reed. Went back to 6 targets last week. But he had 11 targets the week before. Has touchdowns now in back-to-back weeks. Is going to be the lead receiver here. And Michigan State's going to need to put up some points somehow. And I think that's where they're going to turn to. So, we know his upside. We saw it last year. I just don't think that Michigan State has been able to open up that passing game without Kenneth Walker there to take over the offense's attention. That is the slate this week. Decent slate. Actually amazing slate for watching. I think there's enough value at wide receivers. You can pay up places you need to. That group of 5 game, that MAC game, give us a nice preview of MACtion coming up in a few weeks. It's going to be fun on this slate. Get pieces of it all over. And just excited about this week. Some really, really big games this week. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Again, if you are looking for the place to come, NBA is about to start next week. We kill NBA at DFS Army. NFL is going strong. College football is going just as strong. NHL just started, and the cheat sheets are out every day. Our optimizer, our DFS domination station optimizer is doing great. Our DS, we call it. And yeah, with your subscription, you get access to the DS, you get access to all the cheat sheets, you get access, most importantly, to our Discord where we keep you up to date with news, which this week is going to be a news-filled week again. Yeah, we're really excited for the rest of the season. This is kind of the halfway mark, and we hope you join us. Thank you so much, and hope to see you next week.